Hi, this is the voice of Heidie Calero with another interesting economic capsule on the Puerto Rico economy. We have entitled this capsule Puerto Rico's Economic Play in 2022 because this is fascinating. It's like being in a theater and unveiling all the acts of this drama. Well, we heard the governor of Puerto Rico in a message to the nation, Puerto Rico, saying, well, this is what I have achieved during the past year, and this is what I understand is the context for the fiscal budget that I am submitting to Puerto Rico, and what it is that I see in the future as to all the things that, what politicians say. Well, in this first graph that I'm depicting for you, the first act in this drama is the reduction of the public debt, which was renegotiated in the bankruptcy court with Judge Taylor Swain, the negotiation with the bondholders, and the $33 billion of the Commonwealth, which was renegotiated to $7.4 billion in new bonds in exchange with the bondholders, plus $7 billion in cash that was paid to these bondholders back in March of 2015. So overall, from $33 billion, we negotiated down to now $19 billion. That's a reduction of 42%, not a reduction of 80%, as the governor said in his message to the country. Let's look at the next act in this drama, and it's the Consolidated Budget 2023, which I said before, the message of the governor is the context for this Consolidated Budget, which is historical in terms of the magnitude that has been submitted, and it's $28.7 billion. That includes the general fund, which is usually what is used for the current operations of the government, and it's based on recurrent revenues. That's $12.6 billion, or 44% of that $28.7 billion. Then you have federal funds, which is the segment in this graph, which is this color, which is sort of red, and that's $11.2 billion in 2023, and that's about 39% of that budget. And then special funds, which the legislature usually assigns or allocates to different legislations, which are not necessarily recurrent revenues, and that's about $4.9 billion, or 17%. All in all, only 44% of that budget is within the control of Puerto Rico. 56% is not within the control of Puerto Rico or is not recurrent revenues. And if we dissect that blue segment of that pie, as you see there within those dashed lines, that $12.6 billion is in big tranches. It's $1.2 billion, the debt service of the newly renegotiated debt, the pay-go, which is really what is paid, the checks of the pensioners, the actual pensioners that now the retirement systems are all bankrupt. They don't have any assets. So Commonwealth government, you and I are paying with our taxes, are paying the checks of these pensioners, and that's about $2.9 billion, or 23% of that $12.6 billion. The rest is about $8.5 billion, which is what the government of Puerto Rico can use for the rest of all the functions, be it economic development, be it social growth, be it the operational maintenance of the recurrent expenditures of the government, and all those good things. So only 2 out of every $3 of that general fund are sort of, you have that wiggle room to play with, because the other 2, be it the debt service as well as the pay-go, that's 33%, which is fixed. You have to pay it by law now. So in this third act, it consists of 2 scenes. On the left-hand side in this graph that I'm depicting for you, it's the outlook of economic growth. And these are not the forecast of Heidie Calero Consulting Group. These are the forecast of the Promesa Board, which are the columns that you see there in blue, and the Puerto Rico Planning Board, which is the official agency of the government of Puerto Rico, and that has its charter is to have all the national accounts as well as to make short and long-term economic growth projections. And those are in orange, which you see there. In 2022, this fiscal year, which will finish now in June 30th, the PROMESA board said, well, it's going to be 2.6% growth. Puerto Rico Planning Board is not that aggressive and says, look, it's going to be only 0.8% growth, nothing. 2023, which is the one for this consolidated budget, it's going to be, according to the PROMESA board, 0.9% growth, which is nothing. And the Puerto Rico Planning Board says, oh, it's going to be 1.7% growth. Again, though positive, they are not enough for Puerto Rico to pull out of the hole in which we are with this big, deep recession since 2007. We need rates of real economic growth between 3 and 4%. And as you see there, through 2026, there's nothing in the horizon that says that they are forecasting anything like the rates of growth that Puerto Rico needs. Then scene 2 of this Act 3 in this economic play is the outlook of general fund revenues, the recurrent revenues with which I said before the government of Puerto Rico has to pay the debt service, has to pay go to the pensioners, and the other operational expenditures of the government of Puerto Rico. Well, let's look at the sources of those revenues. And as you see there, in 2022, the total of those general fund revenues is $12.7 billion. In 2023, it was estimated to be $12.5 billion. Remember, the government sent to the Office of Management and Budget, sent a general fund budget of $12.6 billion. So there's a gap there of about 100 million, which will have to be ironed out in these differences between the PROMESA board and the government of Puerto Rico. We'll see how that ends, but it's usually the PROMESA board, the ones that prevails. But what I want to point out in this graph is that these general fund revenues, even throughout 2026, they're not increasing. Of course, economic growth is not increasing either, but they are sort of flat. By 2026, they are forecasting $12.2 billion. So compared with 2023, that's about 300 million lower or lesser revenues than in 2023. But notice what that mustard color, which is the Act 154, these are what the foreign companies, U.S. multinationals, paid to Puerto Rico, over 4% of their exports, and which the U.S. Treasury has allowed them to credit against the payment that they do to Puerto Rico. And the U.S. Treasury has told the government of Puerto Rico, look, as of January 2023, you will not be able, these companies will not be able to get a credit against what they pay in terms of Act 154 to the government of Puerto Rico. Yet, knowing that, the PROMESA board has already forecasted the continuation of Act 154 through 2026. I don't know what they do. They do not explain why this forecast. Maybe they are thinking that these multinational companies, out of the goodness of their heart, they will continue paying the government of Puerto Rico. You and I know better than that. So there is a question of about $1.2, $1.3 billion that have a question mark for 2023 and going on forward through 2026. So the other segments are more or less the sales and use tax. That's the deep blue that you see at the bottom of that graph. It's $2.5 billion more or less even through 2026. You have the personal income tax, which is the orange segment, the second one, $2.3 billion in 2022, expected to be $2.4 billion in 2026. The corporate income tax is about $2.2 billion in 2022, expected to be $2.3 billion by 2026. And then there's the other, which is from $4.1 billion, expected to decline to $3.8 billion. So this is a fascinating economic play of Puerto Rico in 2022 and going forward. Certainly, we have more questions than answers. Don't forget, those of you who like our economic capsules, to go to YouTube, subscribe, give us a like, and don't forget to recommend maybe new topics that you're interested in. And don't forget, the economy is all of us.